And lo, the prediction god came from the sky, and the light shined upon her, and all was well and warm. So yes, Emily is now 4 up on me in predicting the MSI group stage, so I have already decided to basically just concede defeat. The good thing is, though, since I am no longer really a journalist or third-party analyst, my job is not really to predict outcomes, because if I were in the business of predicting outcomes, I probably would have looked at the EULCS lineups and decided to never ever consider joining H2K, instead of helping to transform this team into the team that ended up being the bane of people like Emily's existence in continuously confounding expectation. Anyway, that out of the way.
In a good way, though.
Until the quarterfinals, and then in a bad way. Back to the mid-season invitational, where today the main topics are, we are going to talk about Fnatic again. It would be nice, we'll eventually talk about EVOS, but yesterday we talked about Fnatic, TL, and then kind of RNG, and so today we're probably going to talk about Fnatic, because they completely reversed expectations, KingZone, and Flash Wolves. So, we promise, we'll get to EVOS tomorrow. The opening match of the day is probably the highlight match of the day, so we'll just start with that, because we did a highlight match yesterday, which was the Fnatic versus KingZone game. And Fnatic ended up winning that game pretty handily. It was nice to see, a little bit refreshing, but let's not mince words a little bit, and let's get down to exactly what made this game happen. So what immediately jumps out to you, Emily?
I loved what Fnatic did in this early game against KingZone. Like, I absolutely loved it. I thought, so a lot of people are going to point out the Corki into the Scion banner push, which I also thought was quite clever. But really what made this game for me was the early tracking that they did on Zac, because Zac is super punishable early. And they knew where Peanut was at all times, which allowed them to get so much like bot side priority. And it was just, I was like super impressed by Fnatic with that. Like, that's what stood out to me more than the Corki, even though I like the Corki, obviously. I thought that, like, what they did against Peanut was just really smart, and it got to the point where, because they were able to push down turrets so early initially, they could then transition into the mid game really well, and KingZone really didn't have a lot of opportunities to come back in that game. And I just thought it was really well thought out, because in my opinion, you really do have to find some semblance of control over that bot side, and that is what they did early, and I thought it was great. I was really proud of Fnatic for this game. I thought it was awesome.
And from that perspective, it seems like they really well-researched KingZone. They came with a game plan specifically targeting KingZone. But I look at this draft and these team compositions from the other perspective, and I think to myself, this is Fnatic. This is exactly what Fnatic have wanted to do all season, and what has gotten them like the most success. I would say that this is kind of borderline their god comp. You have Skarner, which I watch Broxa playing other champions, and I borderline think he's a one-trick, even though I know he's far more famous for more aggressive picks like Lucian and Elise. You see Tristana. Obviously, Tristana Reckless is kind of it is effectively a meme at this point. And then you have Braum is whatever. You have like 3 champions that Bebo has really been relying on this tournament. Ornn is one of them, and then of course Corki is always the champion that I think of when I think of Caps this season and his roams, and when I set up in the initial episode, and like when Caps will get the most inside trades, he's almost always, when I think of that, he's almost always on the court. For me, it seemed like that. And also Fnatic love level 1s. Like, they practice level 1s really strongly. It's not even leaking information at this point to know that they focus a lot of information on a lot of their scrim time on practicing level 1s. Yeah, to me this was kind of standard what Fnatic would want to do. And obviously Tristana Bond is like a fairly good lane into Zyra. The Tristana jump can cancel the Rakan engage. That's one of the reasons. Obviously he didn't do that very successfully in the early laning phase. They ended up getting first blood, and then Reckless died 2v2. But stuff like that is very strong. So that's kind of what I see. Is I'm not even sure if this was necessarily Fnatic really hard researching what they think would be effective against KingZone, or just deciding, you know what, we're going to play what we think is really good, right? What we feel comfortable playing after yesterday being a complete and utter disaster, and it ended up working out for them because they love that pixel brush between mid lane and dragon. They love that. I know this very well because my support did a very similar thing to Prey this season. Spraddle feels Prey's pain, and burned both Flash and died.
Bro's just having flashbacks throughout this entire game.
Yes, exactly. But the difference, so the thing is that Fnatic repeatedly went in for the red buff, and they continued to control this area. They did that pretty effectively. There was an instance where, you know, his mid laner backs, and BDD, I think, teleports to lane, and Broxa intelligently knows that he can't contest, so he leaves the Raptors in that situation. So he's actually playing this fairly smart. This was like one of the best games I've ever seen Broxa play, and again, I think he's just way more confident and way more mindful and way more able to devote like more stuff to thinking about enemy jungle and what he should do in his pathing when he's playing Skarner, because he just is really comfortable as champion. That's kind of the situation that I saw from this game. Downsides, I con-inted. I think that's pretty fair.
I was sad because so I'm not talking about what happened in lane, but like one thing I've praised Khan for this past split is he's really improved on his flanks and his teleports. And I will stand by that, despite the fact that if this was the game you're looking at, you would not know, because it was bad. Like, it reminded me of the game they played against, it was like their first series against KSV, where Khan was out and they had Rascal, and Rascal obviously had, like, he just did not have synergy with the team. He was also playing Vladimir. All of his flanks were bad. His TPs were bad. That's what this game reminded me of, actually. And I was just like, no, why are we going back here? Because he honestly has improved, despite the fact that this game you would not be able to tell, because he had a rough outing. I don't know if it's one of those weird things where he feels like, oh no, I have to carry now that the bot lane is like effectively dead for a while.
They got back in the game pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So I have no idea. But yeah, he was pretty rough. It was probably also aided by the fact that despite the fact that it was more bot side that they were targeting in terms of jungle invades, like you said, they controlled the red like really well. I don't even remember when Peanut was able to get, or when KingZone was able to get their first red. I don't even think
it was the third one, which we'll get to in a minute.
Yeah. So I think not having any sort of jungle pressure also hurt. And the fact that BDD was pushed in by Caps because they had the really smart Corki response. So they were anticipating the Scion mid flex, or they just, like you said, they just wanted to go with something comfortable. They knew Caps could push out and affect side lanes. Either way, it worked really well because it also meant that not only did Peanut have like negative jungle pressure for the beginning of this game, which doesn't help Khan, and previously one of my harshest criticisms of Khan was that he did need topside pressure in order to succeed last year. And then he also didn't have, so like not only did he not have jungle pressure, but then he also didn't have pressure coming from mid lane either. And that is obviously going to affect how much he can push up. And I don't think he adjusted to that either. So that was also an issue.
So there are definitely some things to take away from this. Like you said, this is more, it's expected from Khan in a way. Not that like we expect him to int every game or that this wasn't particularly bad, but just that this is like flavors of Khan we've seen before.
Yeah.
He has had trouble with flanks in the past and grouping and things of that nature. He has had trouble when he doesn't have push from mid in terms of playing up, because this guy will almost always want to play up, he'll almost always want to go in. And I think that's fine as long as he has the scenarios, like, because he can get more in trades a lot than a lot of other people. We described him on one episode, I think, as the UZI of top lane.
Yeah.
So I think it's not necessarily awful that he plays like this. It just means that, and it's interesting because we talked about Sion and Corki, and I actually think, and Caps even said this, that the Corki matchup isn't super good early. It's just that because they had so much control over jungle and bot and that pixel brush, that it was really hard for KingZone to push back in mid. So they lost mid pressure, even though the matchup isn't necessarily like super Corki favored right away. So I think that's what's worth talking about as well. And it's weird because it still felt like at moments, even with all this, that Fnatic weren't necessarily getting consistent tempo out of this. And by that, a lot of it comes down to like backs and stuff like this, like the third red buff invade, which is where Peanut ultimately does get his red. They end up doing this without bot lane pushed out, like they don't have tempo bot. Reckless doesn't have the push. I think they had just backed actually. So KingZone's bot lane had pressure there, and they end up getting the catch on, was it Broxa? I think it was Broxa for that. And the only reason why they traded 1-for-1 was because Khan had a really unfortunate teleport. I actually don't, I think his teleport itself was fine, but he should have canceled it, because the teleport actually split Fnatic. It forced mid and jungle to go toward him, and then it opened up, or was it mid and jungle? I don't remember. I'm inconsistent on who died. But it opened up an opportunity for Prey and Gorilla to go in on the other side. So the teleport itself was fine, but he should have canceled it as soon as someone on Fnatic died, because the fight's over, basically. So that was interesting to see that. And then also there was a top siege, I think, where Fnatic are grouped all the way top. Khan is able to pressure all the way to their second tier turret. There's no control in mid lane, so they're tunneling on one lane, so they actually lose tempo doing that. They back, and KingZone clear all their wards around Baron and end up, except for of course the scuttle, and they put down blues, and then Peanut has a late back. Peanut ends up going to his own red buff, and I think trying to clear a ward, because he probably knows that Fnatic is setting up to do Dragon, and he's like, maybe I can steal it, but then decides to back. But if Peanut had just backed with Gorilla, I think they maintain vision and push around Baron, and this game goes very differently. So there were mistakes that Fnatic definitely were making even when they had control that I think are interesting, and it's almost sometimes around Fnatic Barons, you almost need to int into them before they will accept something, and that's kind of what KingZone ended up doing. So yeah, I mean, it was good, I think, by Fnatic for sure, but there were definitely weird things that KingZone and Fnatic were both doing throughout the game.
Yeah, and it's not, like I said, the main thing for me with KingZone and why they're so strong is, I went over this in our earlier videos, but just to reiterate, like, because they do usually play so well together as a 5-man unit, and obviously Khan's TP and flanks were really bad this game, but and they also just have such strong mechanics and kind of understanding of tempo, that is how they can get back into games, even if something like this does happen. So this is a really nice blueprint, I think, for other teams to look at and say, like, how would I target KingZone, especially in a best of one? Yeah.
Pretend you're Fnatic. Interesting to see also, just like the Corki Trist setup is really strong. And if you want to play late game team fights, and they get the first blood, and they have that set up, so they're in a really good position for most of the game. Yeah, so let's break this down a little bit and talk a little bit more about KingZone. I think is a good place to start because they also had kind of a weird game against EVOS. So what do we think that this is a worrying sign for KingZone in the tournament, or do we like what exactly do you think is the problems that KingZone are having?
I mean, I don't necessarily think it's a worrying sign. I think this composition was really interesting to me. I'm not sure if like I'm making a joke, by the way, guys. This is a joke, but like not sure if Khan was like so upset. They were just like, okay, we'll give you like this huge split pusher where you will just destroy side lanes in Alawi. Because that is what ended up happening this game, and a lot of it was because, and I won't get too much into EVOS because we're going to talk about them another day, but a lot of it was because despite the fact that EVOS do like to pressure side lanes, they don't necessarily understand how to get the push or how to get tempo or what they're giving up to descend on their opponents as 5 because they love doing that. And so a lot of Khan's pressure not only came from the favorable matchup, but also just the fact that EVOS gave him a lot when they pulled Stark out of that lane to go group. So that was a big thing that also affected Khan because I know a lot of people are going to look at this game and they're going to be like, whoa, Khan like flame horizoned him so early. This is insane. A lot of that has to do with the fact that KingZone just had a better understanding of how to play around their side lanes than EVOS does. But in terms of a worrying trend, I mean, I'm not super worried. I would have been more worried if they had dropped this game, I guess, because I think EVOS still has a lot of, they make a lot of basic macro mistakes still that I think a team like KingZone can take advantage of and did take advantage of in this game. Especially when it comes to vision, catching them out, using the Talia in tandem with the Ornn to try to zone out KingZone or to take turrets, stuff like that. That was kind of inconsistent. But yeah, I mean, I think today showed that I still think teams will have a very difficult time beating KingZone in a best of 5 because they do adjust really well, in my opinion. And I also think this game in and of itself was kind of a weird adjustment because they were just like, okay, we're going to focus on, getting our top laner ahead and making sure that we still have mid pressure with the Karma, so keeping up with what they wanted to do with the Scion, but just with a different champion. And then obviously Prey got Kaisa, which also helps just divide team fights into skirmishes, which can help the Alawi as well, in a weird way, because Alawi is not, in my opinion, typically a champion that you think of for grouping or 5v5 team fighting.
Sometimes, if she gets good setup. But
yeah, it's not what I think of her. That's not her strength. I will say that. True. It's not that you can't do it. It's just it's not the strength of the champion, in my opinion. So, I mean, I think they had this comp and they came into the game with an idea of definitely what they want to do. They wanted to get that favorable matchup for Khan. They wanted to have him split push, and that is what they ended up doing. The big thing for me in KingZone is still some early game pressure that they're giving up, that we saw both in the Fnatic game where Fnatic had this great level 1 setup and then kind of stomped all over their jungle, which affected them. And then in this game, I think there were other times where they gave up pressure, despite the fact that one of the things that I think people should notice about this game and that they made a focus, I believe purposefully, was getting that dragon control, which ended up helping them immensely because it was 3 Infernal Drakes stacking on top of one another. So yeah, I mean, that was kind of what I saw from this game. I'm actually not super worried about KingZone. I was more worried about, say, SKT in 2016 during their group stage run. So in terms of like levels of worrying, it's not super worrying to me yet. Because I did think that teams would be able to take a few games, a few like best of ones off of them. It's when they get into best of fives, I think it's going to be really difficult.
It's funny that you mentioned SKT. Maybe we'll find out that KingZone had some really unfortunate schnitzel or something along those lines.
They had their own Heidi Lau moment.
Yeah, instead of Hot Pot, they had bad schnitzel. So I think for me, it's these compositions that they drafted were really low pressure relative. Like KingZone are really good at using tempo jungle. They're like one of the best. I described them as a 2-item team, and this is feeling increasingly like a 2-item tournament in a lot of ways, with things like Ezreal, with a lot of these picks with a lot of these high roaming mid picks, and things that get a lot of side lane pressure. So it's interesting to me to see them go for like Zac and Trundle, just super. Even in this case, when like for example Olaf is up, or in the Evos game. So it was I found that curious, and then they went for like the Kaiser Braum, and again you have a ridiculous amount of mid pressure. I think we're very clearly getting illustrated some of the weaknesses of Karma, for example.
Yeah. In
this game and the Flash Wolves RNG game, which if you have a good side laning mid, she can't match that mid to late, and then early on, Karma will struggle to get a push before she can like get first item or get the ult and Q with enough points in it. So I think that's been an issue in both of those games. It's clear because obviously Evos had a Talia, which will get push against her early and sideline better against her later. And then obviously she can push back and she can defend turrets, but she's not going to be a dedicated. And then the same issue with Zoe. So in the RNG Flash Wolves game. So there were just some things like that, and that KingZone will struggle without having good mid pressure. KingZone will struggle under those circumstances, which isn't necessarily a surprise for us. And then of course Alawi will win the lane against Ornn, but usually not until later. And then Kai'Sa, we've already talked about the thing about Kai'Sa and how Kai'Sa will play out the lane. Yeah. So it was just these kinds of interesting comps that they're picking up. It reminds me a lot of Tigers when they played that one very distinct game where Peanut went on like a heavy farming nocturne, right? Yep. And then they just got completely closed out. So it kind of reminds me of this, like almost like they're playing things that they're not necessarily as comfortable with, just make sure that they're able to play those kinds of compositions, or that they're able to, they're like, okay, we see an Ornn, we want to match Ornn with Hank Busters like Trundle and Kai'Sa, and then they build their composition around that idea, and it ends up not having good lane pressure or something of that nature. So I'm not super concerned. I think that they are still able to execute the idea of the 2-item comp really well. Like we saw the Ezreal yesterday. Not extremely concerned about KingZone.
Yeah.
Fnatic, on the other hand, what is making Fnatic so strong today, Emily? Break it down for me.
Well, Team Liquid is having. So I don't know if you want to talk about them yet, because I know you had a rant about them. But I think another reason why, so Fnatic had a really great understanding of how to go up against KingZone that also, like you said, really jived well with what they want to do anyway, like with their natural style. And then Team Liquid, they basically they continued.
The level 1 was hilarious. It reminded me of like season 3 TSM versus OMG, where OMG was like sieging where TSM were like sieging OMG when OMG was in their base or something. It was very weird. I was confused. It gave me that kind of feeling. It's like, wait, which side is blue? Hello? But yeah, it was entertaining.
There was that. There's also just like, so we saw them run the Yasuo comp that people heavily criticized them for yesterday, which I actually thought was, like, we talked about yesterday, so I won't go over that. But they ran it against TL, and TL's problem, regardless of who they are going to start as a support, is side lane pressure. And today we saw TL try to move away from that and go for more like 5v5, like
in one
sort
instance
of pressure. Yeah, in the Fnatic game.
And the other instance, they blinded Yasuo, and Galio got picked, and Yasuo didn't have.
Forget about that.
Yasuo didn't have TP, so it was like you have to match Galio inside.
That was, yeah, that was a
little sad. Okay.
That was an unlucky game to watch. But yeah, touching on like how Fnatic went against TL, I think they just had so much of a stronger understanding of how to use that side lane pressure with Caps' Yasuo. Whereas TL went back and defaulted to the Azir Tristana with like Smithy on the Olaf. So obviously they wanted to pressure early and then also be able to group for team fights and hopefully rotate the Trist, because she won't necessarily get the push, but you want to rotate her to take down turrets. And that is not what happened, because Fnatic were able to play the side lanes a lot better. And that's another reason why Fnatic looked really good, is just they came into this game with a better understanding of how to split pressure. And I think that matched up for TL specifically very poorly against what we've touched upon are TL's weaknesses. And that is how to play around their side lanes. So, and we saw that from them in both games, but I'm harping on this one because I think Fnatic showed the right, quote unquote, right way to do it against TL with the Yasuo, which they'd already tried previously earlier on in the day. So, and now rant away, because I know you had something to say about Team Liquid and the community response.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about Team Liquid a little bit, but I think since we're mostly focusing on Fnatic in this topic, I wanted to talk about that first. I just look at these things and it feels like Fnatic want to be really comfortable today. And maybe that's what they needed to get back into the game. Because both of these compositions are things that Fnatic really loves to play. Caps has been spamming a ridiculous amount of Yasuo in his solo queue, so he really likes that champion. Champion's pretty strong right now, so with the Conquer build and everything else. So I think it's just they went to something that they know, okay, we're going to have a late game AD carry that will keep us in the game. We're going to have the ability to side lane with our mid laner, because Caps has actually been really good at this split. Like, people were talking about how they thought maybe Fnatic would struggle because Caps only learned to sideline this split. If he learned it, then it's not really a problem, is it? When you're against someone like
maybe he'll forget
Belter and
like
Impact who don't know how to do it, you know? No, because Caps has been a really strong member of the team at this point, and Fnatic's lane assignments have improved a lot, largely because of that. So I think that that's something that they showed off. And also, when talking about the difference between Fnatic and TL, when we say that side lane management and wave management, it's wave management in general, guys. It's not just, oh, okay, they don't know how to stay in side lane. It's, why are we resetting on this? Like, I explained really in detail that, you know, Caps will never roam on this or whatever, and then in terms of, like, the lane not having priority, but Pobelter will give up pressure to do roams, and then you lose your mid turret. Guys, like, you lose control of the game that way if you're not playing to tempo, if you're not maintaining pressure in your lanes, your jungler gets dicked, and you don't have a fun time, and that's really what happened to them. Like, even with Azir, you should be able to have some pressure against Yasuo. With Azir Olaf, you should be able to get enough tempo against Trundle, especially with Cho'Gath into Sion. Like, you should have decent lanes for pressure in this, and then they just constantly, like, had bad backs. They gave up pressure and they gave up tempo. Like, there was an instance where I was actually really impressed that Team Liquid had push on top side with Cho'Gath, and then Cho'Gath goes mid, helps Pobelter get push mid, so they can use that, like Team Liquid can use that momentum and do something in like topside jungle. But what do? They go bot when they have like 0 pressure bot or something, and they ended up getting a kill off of it, but then you just gave up pressure in both of your solo lanes. You just gave up pressure in both of your solo lanes. Get pressure in a lane without it. And now you have no control on the map anymore again. Because as soon as you back after this, Fnatic already has control of bottom river again. This isn't going to net you a very good advantage that you can push. So for me, it's just like understanding what the waves are doing, when the waves are bouncing, when I can make this play, when I can't. Like all these sorts of very basic problems that I complained about in the play-in stage can to an extent apply to Team Liquid as well. I know it's a joke, haha, NA is a wildcard region. You're playing like one, by the way, like you actually are. Holy fucking shit. Like every time I hear all of this shit from NA, like I will dominate posts on Twitter, oh, it really is. We just don't have enough player on the server, guys. Do you know how many people are on the Taiwanese server? Okay, do you know how many people? Well, they play on the Korean server. That's not a fair comparison. They can't bring that many Koreans from the server. Like, the problem is the amount of people that can play League of Legends for LMS. And guess what? There are fewer people who can play League of Legends for LMS. Because you guys also have access to imports, and they come over and they get worse, okay? It's not about the amount of people who are on your fucking server. It's not about any of this shit, like all of this bullshit that I hear all the time from North America. It's like, oh, we need more money, or we just don't have good enough players, or all this, and then you come back at them and say, but why is your side wave control like this? Why is this wave not bouncing on top side? Why are you giving up pressure on this lane to go to this lane? And if your problem is your macro, which it is, by the way, your problem is your macro, it's not your fucking players. I joke about it all year. NA has no side pressure. They just group mid all the time. And I don't know, they either don't think there's a problem with that, or they do, because the only team that seems to be trying to change that is Echo Fox, by the way. Echo Fox actually tries to get consistent side pressure and execute 1-3-1s and bounce minion waves correctly, and I think this team has a lot of other problems. But they're at least trying that kind of shit. Like, China, LPL, was a joke. Their macro was garbage. They suddenly get better because RNG shows up, and they're actually playing, like, semi-half-decent macro. Literally, that's what happened this year. You can watch RNG games, and I can explain to you the change in how they're setting up their lanes that makes them very different from Western teams, from other old LPL teams, okay, that makes them consistently succeed. Like, you point out how they're setting up their side waves. They're constantly making sure they have pressure on one of their side waves so that UZI doesn't have to overextend to get mid control. That's it. UZI stays ridiculously safe that way. Like, he can just soft push to reset the mid wave. They don't lose Baron control off of it, and he doesn't int. Like, it's really simple. I watch so many ADCs push an extra wave mid more than they shouldn't and die to flanks in games. This is like a consistent problem. It's one problem RNG almost never have, because they always focus on getting pressure insides first. Because they, in their minds, if our AD dies, right, then game is over. So by going with making sure that their AD doesn't have to push the extra wave, they get pressure on sides first, no one can collapse on him, they're really safe that way. So anyway, that was fun. RNG suck also. RNG have a lot of problems. We won't get into that right today as much, but that's definitely an issue.
And I guess the thing that I would stress, I thought that was a good rant, but I mean, I'm entertained. But I think the thing that I would stress with TL is like nothing, like if you go back and watch our videos from before, like nothing we're saying now and nothing we're seeing now from the games is something that is unknown, right? It's like a very known problem with this team. So, and to some extent with North America and the way they've played this split. And previous splits, actually, but we'll focus just on this split.
It's so well known that it's a joke on Twitter. It's so well known.
The NARAM
but then this ends up being, but then NA performs poorly at international events, and people don't point to that as a reason. And I don't know why. Zero idea why. Like, you're insanely self-aware, but not self-aware enough of your self-awareness. I have no idea what the problem is. Hi.
I mean, knowing the problem isn't even half of the battle. So. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I assume so. I'm not in a North American team, so. Let's talk about Flash Wolves and be happy, because I actually am really impressed by some of the stuff the Flash Wolves are doing. That said, they do the ADC thing. I noticed that in the RNG game.
Yeah.
Where Betty pushed an extra wave and got caught. Anyway.
I was not surprised to see that.
So I think one of the things that we both really stressed, or at least I really stressed early on, was their vision control, which has been really strong throughout the tournament, and they're able to get good wards on bot consistently and make it so that even in situations where, like the RNG game, you should get pretty good push with Tristana Morg, at least early on. Actually, Janna should not be safe in that lane, especially against an Olaf. And they were able to make that situation really oppressive and difficult, basically just because they had good vision and because Zoe had good control of mid. So they transferred pressure from mid to bot very effectively while also maintaining pressure in mid.
Yeah. I think the most thing, so going into this, I was down on the Flash Wolves because I really wasn't sure how they would, if they get pressure bot side, how they would transfer that to the rest of the map, especially with Mujin having been so passive, both in the play-ins and then also in Taiwan throughout the season. But I think we are, and I'm not going to say Mujin is like a super aggressive jungler, because he's not, and I don't think he ever will be. He just doesn't it just doesn't seem like his style of jungling. But I do think the thing that has impressed me the most thus far about the Flash Wolves is the fact that they have, as a team, and I'm not saying they're peerless in this, because they still do mess up in the mid game and like the mid to late game. There's still a lot of holes, in my opinion, in how they transfer pressure, but they've improved significantly on that. So if they do get that bot side advantage, or if they do get the push in mid, they are actually able to move Mujin around to take away either some of the enemy jungle or get better vision down. Because again, he's not the type of jungler who's going to like contest his opponent directly, right? Like he'll focus more on vision or pressuring lanes or maybe doing a little bit of counter jungling. And I think that is the thing that I did not expect from the Flash Wolves. I did not think they'd be able to do that as well as they have at this tournament so far. So I think that's the thing that I really like out of this team. That's really what I thought they were shaking on going in. And they've ended up being a lot stronger than I thought. So if they do get bot pressure, they're able to transfer that to mid and jungle. And if they end up like losing any sort of pressure bot for whatever reason, they still have good enough vision that it covers them. And also they've been able to transfer pressure from jungle and mid back down to bot to have really good bot side control and really good dragon control. And also that helps Betty, especially when he's on the likes of Ezreal or these kind of 2 item AD carries that we're seeing at this tournament. So I think that's really good. Also because Betty is not still, in my opinion, like one of the best laners at this event, but he is really strong in team fights. And I think that has also helped in terms of how the Flash Wolves have approached moving him around and setting up vision bot side to ensure that he is safe. So yeah, that's my like commendation, I guess, of the Flash Wolves. I did not think they'd be able to transfer that pressure from mid to jungle to bot or bot to mid jungle as well as they have in the early to mid game.
Even just something as refreshing as when they burn an enemy TP, they acknowledge that they won, right? They acknowledge that they won, they disengage, and then they know that they can make the play again, and the enemy can't TP again, so they probably win the play. Like, just seeing something like that around Baron for them when they burned Letme's TP by baiting Baron and immediately disengaged and knew that then now they have like very free, very easy Baron control was really good, because I had just seen their game like the same day against Team Liquid, where Team Liquid are setting up to make a play on Flash Wolves while Flash Wolves are sieging their bot turret, and they have control mid, so they're able to do this because Maple has to reset. And because of this, because Pobelter had pressure mid and then went bottom, they force Maple's TP. But then what they do is that they force on that, even though they don't necessarily, they force on that instead of disengaging, because you guys are going to lose your turret anyway, by the way. So they force on that instead of disengaging, and they have tempo top as well, so they could have just gone top and traded where they had an advantage, but instead they force on that and they lose the fight. So seeing something like being happy with burning a TP and calling that a win is just good. It's smart, you know? It's knowing when you can pressure advantage, where you have tempo, like, okay, we expended this to get this, so we need to reset now, is really good from them. I also think that they have like a really strong read on the meta. They're able to play out the mage supports. I was really worried about how they would do that.
I was so sad when I saw them coming back. I was like, no, we went over this. But yeah, they've been pretty good so far. I mean, Sword Art, like, a lot of people, again, are going to point to Sword Art's, like, insane Morgana bindings, especially in TL, just because he was, like, super on point. But I think, yeah, it hasn't hampered anything they've wanted to do, and they played around his Janna super well.
And they're playing, it's interesting because they're playing po-comps really well, so they aren't even needing good engage, like just being happy with disengage and stuff like this. This is all part of not needing to play around really, really heavy engage. And they're also finding alternatives. I think we never really have had a good meta where Maple can just be the team's engage as Galio or as Zoe if you want to just get picks and stuff like this. So I mean, they were always really good when LeBlanc was on the Twitter, for example.
Yeah.
So I think that has also helped them quite a bit. So maybe targeting mid-based engage or pick champions might be an option, as opposed to targeting Alistar the way it was, and engage supports the way it was in the past years.
Yeah.
But So I think that that's something that's really cool about how this team is playing. I don't know. They definitely looked like the best team at the tournament today. With KingZone playing kind of weird comps and everything else.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy. Like, I'm happy to be wrong about Flash Wolves if it means that they're playing this way and improving. Like, good on them.
Yay.
Yeah. Woo!
That's about all I have. Anything else?
Nope, that's it. I just really want to point out how they're facilitating Maple and Mujin, or how Maple and Mujin are kind of working a little bit better.
Okay, let's do really, really quick rundown for tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
RNG versus TL, probably the most questionable teams outside EVOS. Thoughts?
I'll go RNG still, just because the reason is not because, like, oh my god, TL are done and they're tilted and whatever. I think it's because even though I'm still, and we're gonna talk, I assume we'll talk probably about RNG tomorrow since they face TL and Fnatic. I think RNG still, despite their early game issues, have a better understanding of, again, just wave management, side wave pressure, how to transfer pressure from a side wave to something else on the map, whereas that is TL's weakness. So similarly to what I said about the Flash Wolves, oh no, I thought TL were going to beat Flash Wolves. I think it was Flash Wolves RNG matchup. It's kind of similar to what I think is going to happen with RNG versus TL. So I'm going RNG.
Yeah, I'm going to go RNG on this one too, just because the thing that annoyed me the most about RNG was they could have lane swapped. Which happened very similarly in both games against Flash Wolves. I feel like they could have lane swapped with their Tristana. Both TL and RNG, and that didn't happen. So
RNG's early laning assignments are a little
So it's just Emily is playing really weird too. Like he's usually really, really gutsy with the Olaf, and it's like, why are they tunneling so much on Olaf? Usually because he uses the fact that Olaf fast clears to gank bot really early. And even though that's kind of a predictable thing for them, it's just comfortable, and now he feels really lost. But I'm gonna go with RNG first game. Evo's Fnatic. I don't know, this is, like I said before, that I think Evos could take a game off of Fnatic, but I'm gonna go with, I think I'm just gonna go with Fnatic on this one.
I'm going to stick with Fnatic, but I do think that Evos, like, we'll talk about them later, but despite how much I kind of, like, harp on them very frequently, I think they've actually shown a lot of improvement, even just through the games I've seen from them at this tournament, which is super impressive because it means that they're thinking and they're adjusting on the fly. So I won't be surprised if Evos take it, but I'm still going to go Fnatic.
You know, it's great. I'm going Evos. Screw it. Just for fun. I want to be more in the hole. More in the hole. Because I'm sticking with what I said earlier. I think that there's a lot of stuff that Evos can do against Fnatic just by being surprising. So that's what I'm gonna do now. KingZone versus Flash Wolves. How do we feel? This is actually really a much more interesting match than we would have thought at the start of the tournament.
This is super interesting.
A really hype match to end round 1 on, so.
I'm still going to go KingZone just because I have more faith in their mid to late game than I do Flash Wolves still, because I still think there are some holes there that KingZone should be able to exploit. However, I won't be super shocked if Flash Wolves actually take this game as well, because I do think that Flash Wolves are the perfect team to attack what destabilizes KingZone, and that's having absolute control over the bot side of the map, because it, as we saw today, affects the entire rest of what happens. So if they're able to get bot side pressure and jungle pressure, then I think Flash Wolves could take it, but I'm still going to go default to KingZone.
I think because of how heavily Flash Wolves emphasize that in their drafts, and the fact that KingZone are being more willing to take losing mid matchups in their recent drafts. Maybe today was the day that they need to kind of snap out of that, and they decide they don't want to do that anymore, and then I could be completely wrong, but I'm just going to give this one to Flash Wolves. Just almost as a, because I've been wrong about them, sort of give me. Because, I don't know, like, I do think that people sort of overrated KingZone by putting them on this very untouchable sort of pedestal. Like, ultimately they should still win the tournament, but going in thinking, oh, we're just going to lose to KingZone, we should be okay with that, I think it's a little weird, because there are definitely, like, if you analyze KingZone, there are weaknesses in that team. There are weaknesses in all of this team, all the teams at this tournament. So, yeah, I think I'll give Flash Wolves one, just because they've used their compositions have just been really smart. They're smarter than KingZone's, and their approach to bot control is just really strong, I think, against.
Yeah.
RNG Fnatic. Ooh, spicy.
Oh god. I think it's going to play out similarly to their first game, where we see each team's like strengths and then each team's weaknesses. This is also one of the ones that's weirdly, I'd like really want to see the draft beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of it was down to draft the first round.
Yeah.
It was just they had extremely narrow windows to execute on.
Yeah. Since I picked RNG to beat TL, I actually think that Fnatic can take this if they execute what they did against RNG day one better. So I'll take Fnatic here.
Okay, I said that
it's tough.
Evos.
Like this is.
I said
this
Evos.
And Kings and Flash Wolves are super tough.
I think that Fnatic are a very emotionally momentum-based team. So since I went Evos earlier, I have to go RNG on this one. Okay. Flash Wolves Evos.
Flash Wolves.
Yeah, I think Flash Wolves. KingZone Team Liquid. We have both KingZone. Okay, so there we go. We've got like 3 we differed on, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Evos. Fnatic, KingZone, Fashels, and RNG Fnatic are all.
So I will be 0-7 tomorrow in the head-to-head. That'll be a good time. Okay. Thanks everyone for watching, and
Thanks, guys.
we'll try to maybe make these shorter. Probably not. I don't care.